One more time. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Alyce Dissette.
I'm Linda Chapman. We're the co-directors of the LGBTQ Artists Archive Project here at the Pickup.
And welcome, what a great looking group. Anyway, I'm going to just turn this over to Ken.
We're really happy you're here.
We're very happy you're here.
We're really happy you're here. The Archive Project here is comprised of 7 artistic entities. We have Lola Pashalinski, the 5 Lesbian Brothers. Mo Angeles is here with us tonight. Carmelita Tropicana, John Kelly, who's going to be on the panel, Richard Move, and Ishmael Houston Jones. So Alyce and I are committed to getting these artists' archives housed and placed in our lifetime. Okay, so that's the basic idea.
We're archive coaches.
We're the archive coaches.
And we have 2 goals for this. Number 1 is for these artists to be able to generate their archive. In other words, what it is that they want to leave behind for as their legacy. And number 2, figure out a public platform on the net, probably, internet, probably, where also there could be public access to the history of their work. So those are the 2 main goals of our project. We expect it to take some years. And will you guys who are in the project just raise your hands so we, we are well represented.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I see many familiar faces I'm so glad to see, and what we're trying to do is have a conversation about how an artist-driven archive is different than an institutional archive in the performing arts. However, they have to be married now. It can't be one or the other. And so this conversation is really, we thought because of the work that La Mama has done, they've been in the frontier, they've been doing it since the beginning, before everybody else got to the table, frankly. And also they have an ongoing relationship with John Kelly's work over the years, so we thought that pairing them made a kind of sense in all of this. So, have fun. Now I'm turning it over to Ken.
There we go, Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken Trenelia. I'm a professional dramaturg and theater scholar, and in 2009 I co-founded the American Theater Archive Project as part of the American Society for Theater Research, which is the organization for scholars, many of whom teach in colleges and universities, but are theater historians and theater theorists. And as someone who got his PhD, like being in an archive and figuring out what people who created theater long before me did by what they left behind, I got really interested in that. And as also a professional dramaturg who's invested in process and looking at the archive and also bringing that into the making of new theater, I was fascinated by what can we do, not only to preserve records that are already in archival repositories, but how could we start educating theater makers now to save documents of their process and product as they make it, so that it can be left behind for future scholars like me to go ahead and look at it and be able to have access to things like that.
Future artists.
And yes, and future artists. No, and that's the thing too. So we're trying to discover all of the people who can use an archive. There are fans, there are audiences, there are theater companies themselves, there are artists themselves who are trying to fundraise, who need evidence of their work to then make applications and also show it. It's about legacy too, right? That when we're working in the performing arts, what we do is necessarily ephemeral. And so, but it doesn't mean it can't be documented. So our archive is important. Work of what we did. We were here. We did this thing, and this is how we participated in community. So we're also co-sponsored, besides American Society for Theater Research, American Theater Archive Project. We're co-sponsored by the Literary Managers and Dramaturgs of the Americas, which I'm co-chair of the board. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start with Mia Yu and Kylie Goetz. Is that right? Goetz. Kylie Goetz and Mia Yu, who are from La Mama, artistic director, head of archives. to talk about what the institutional archive is. And then we're going to switch to another pair who I'll introduce at that point to talk about the individual performing artists and how they can preserve the records as they're making the work. Okay, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you.
Did you want to do the video first, or should we talk a little bit about the archive itself?
Hold on one sec. Let's go slideshow. All right, is that up?
Yeah.
Great. All right, so obviously we're from La Mama and the La Mama Archive, and I put together just a bit of documentation, so hopefully we'll start off with a very, very, very brief history of La Mama. La Mama was founded in 1961, so that's more than 64 years of history that we're going to cover in a 2-minute video. Yeah. So.
La Mama began in 1961. It started from a need that founder Ellen Stewart felt within a community of artists. She saw there was a bigger need to serve a global community of artists that deserved to have a voice. All these artists needed space.
Back in 1967, Ellen came around this block one day and looked at this building, and she saw these hearts on the front of the building. And there's something about those hearts that said to her, "Own me."
Over the next 4 decades, Ellen managed to secure even more space. And today, La Mama has an astounding 88,000 square feet of space dedicated to artists. 4 performance venues, an art gallery, rehearsal studios, offices, living space for visiting artists, and an extensive archive of off-Broadway. Each season, La Mama presents more than 70 productions and receives 34,000 visits from people of all ages and all backgrounds who attend performances, exhibitions, educational activities, and the archives.
La Mama is a lot of people, and many persons say, well, how does it keep going? But I know at this moment, every corner of the earth, there are people whose energies and heartbeats, some part of which is directed towards La Mama. And with that kind of thing holding up, honey, we don't sink, okay?
So that was our founder, Ellen Stewart, and let's see. Oh, why did I lose my full screen? Okay.
Can we talk a little bit about
Yeah.
sort of the beginning, like how, I mean, Ellen basically, I mean, we heard just as Kylie was saying, such a short, brief history, and there are so many artists that I'm like, now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, John Kelly needs to be in there. And other people in this room, I shouldn't go down that road of mentioning names, but you know, she was saving things under her bed, in her closet, everywhere. It was in her apartment for the longest time. And I think at some point she realized that maybe there was a need to find a way to organize, to store, to keep these contents that chronicled a really, what she was feeling in the moment was an important part of history. And so at some point, our dear archive director, who just recently passed, Ozzy Rodriguez, she went to him. He came from a publishing background, and she was like, you know what, baby? Maybe you can help me figure out how we can organize all of this and find a way to document and store and catalog all of this content. And that was sort of how our archive got started.
Yeah, it began really organically because she was saving these things so that she could, you know, get more funding for future productions. You need to be able to document what you've done before people will give you money to do more things. But the archive itself was formalized open to the public in 1987. with Ozzy Rodriguez as the first director of archives. We moved to our current space. We were in the basement at 74A. We moved to the current space in 2006. As you can see in some of the photos up here, it's more than 5,000 square feet of space. We have an central exhibition hall. We have an audio-visual room where we have reel-to-reels, VHSs, DVDs, film. We have photo collections, costume collections, props, puppet rooms, huge set pieces, and the large photo up here is the main office. So that
is all our show files.
Yeah, all of our production files, which is on the next slide. It's more than 900 cubic feet of space, and we have more than 50,000 unique items with production footage from more than 1,500 productions, series, and events. And we have about 2,000 visitors every year in person, and about 8,000 to 10,000 visitors who visit our digital collection site. So we also have a digital projects office where we do all of our digitization in-house, and we do that because it can be great to send it out, but for us, retaining physical and intellectual control of all the materials is really important to us.
And just, I mean, just thinking about sort of some of the stuff that Ozzy would say just at the beginning was, Ellen, she asked NYU, the film department, and she was like, you know what, do your students want to gain some experience and shoot some of our shows? So she was like finding that sort of sustainability model at that moment when she didn't have any funds to go towards the archive. And so these young students would come and they would shoot the shows, and that's how we were able to actually document the early work at La Mama. I mean, as you can imagine, keeping this, I mean, it's an incredible archive. It's a treasure of our history. I mean, especially of us who are coming from the non-traditional, you know, it's off Broadway. You know, it's. I mean, how do we sustain this? It's always been our challenge, to be honest. You know, and it's come out of general operating, to be honest, up to this point, you know, most of it. And recently we have been able to secure some funding. I mean, of course we got the NEH, and it was one of the most significant amounts of money that we've ever gotten for the archive, and it all went away.
Yeah.
So,
7 months into a 3-year grant.
Yeah. So this is something that is, I mean, maybe it's going to be a forever issue and a challenge that we have moving forward. Is like, how do we sustain this archive beyond the 50 to 70 shows that we do a season, beyond the other sort of ongoing programs that we have at La Mama. But it feels so important. I don't know how many people that we bring down to the archive, whether they're artists who are performing in the theater or in one of our spaces, or whether it's student groups that come. And sometimes I feel, I mean, I don't know how you feel. You engage with them much more closely than I do, but I feel like it changes people's sort of perspective on their own work. I mean, to me, this is where, and I have a feeling always that our culture, when we don't provide spaces and opportunities for generations to speak together, and for us to feel like, wait a minute, the work that I have now actually has consequences, because people are going to be talking about it later on. Not only is it sort of an educational tool for you to know, oh, this is where I'm coming from, and examining sort of my past to understand who I am now and moving forward, but it really does change people's perspectives about their own work, and them being now a part of this legacy moving forward.
Yep, I actually, in the past week, I have had 3 people cry on tours.
Yeah, I cried on a tour.
Because they see themselves as part of this ongoing legacy, and they understand their work within a context of, it's not just me out here creating alone. I am surrounded by this history and this community, and especially if they're performing at La Mama, then they understand that their work will become part of this collection.
And we
Yeah.
kind of call it a community archive. I mean,
Well-
yes, we're talking about institutional archives,
But yeah,
Yeah,
first and foremost, we are an artist-driven archive. I'm gonna get back to my slide
Yes,
real quick.
go, sorry.
So, no, about the digital collection site, because that for us has been a real way to connect with researchers and students, certainly, but with the artists themselves, more importantly, and the artists' families. We've had people who found, you know, their great-grandmother, or, well, their grandmother, who danced in a show in 1962 in the archives, and they found a photo, and then they reached out to us because, you know, that meant something to them.
we just had Dimitris Papanou, who's
who-
from Greece, who did the
Mythos.
Athens Olympics. I mean, that's
Yeah,
one of the, but he's been at BAM and he's been, you know, doing a lot of incredible work all over, but he started with Mythos Oedipus in Athens as a young artist, was in the chorus of
yeah.
Ellen's adaptation of Oedipus, and we were looking through sort of the program, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm taking pictures," and just being so moved by the whole process of understanding again where are we coming from. This is really vital, especially at a place like La Mama.
Yeah. So the next slide that we have is using La Mama's digital collections, and so since we're talking about John Kelly, I pulled up John Kelly. So if you did a search for John Kelly, this is what you would find. So you'd see a collection of objects that are related to John's work. You'd see
Did you know this, John?
and people that are related to his work, productions, and that sort of stuff. But our public-facing site it allows artists who are within our archives to create links that they can send to people and say, look, this is my work documented at La Mama. So it's not just for us and to be able to have them be searchable, but they can share those links with other people. So if you click on John Kelly's name, then you come to John Kelly's artist record. So it has a little bit of biographical information. It's got the works that are related within our catalog, related productions, special events. This is not 100% up to date because we're in the midst of digitizing all of this production material and adding it to our collections management system. So we're only up to 2012. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's not even in there yet. But we use a relational database, which for us has worked really well because it means that you can click on a person, then click on a show, then click on the items for that show, then click on another person who is in that show, and it sort of creates that joy of archival discovery that you get when you go to a physical archive, but it's online, it's 24/7. One of my favorite things to say to students who do the tours is that if you're writing a paper at 3 o'clock in the morning because you got up, you went to rehearsal, you had class, you had your scene work class, you went and saw your friends play, suddenly it's 3 a.m. and you have paper due the next day, we have primary source materials that are accessible all day long, no matter where in the world you are. But it also means that our artists who live overseas can have a relationship with their work that's saved in our archive on the other side of the planet. We have set up things where we've set up remote screenings for groups in the Ukraine. We have classroom forums that people use to watch Indigenous Native American performances in the UK. Like we're able to facilitate these ways of using our archive because Mia and really starting with Ellen, but starting in 2014 when the push to create this radical access through a digital archive became a focus for us. So here's an example of the difference between what our analog show file looks like and a digital show file. So again, I used one of John Kelly's works, Akin, from 1992. So on the left-hand side, you can see it lives in a hanging file folder. Everything is in, I spread it out, but all the things live either in Mylar or buffered acid-free folders, I promise you, when they're hanging up. But you can see we've got a postcard, we've got program, we've got photos, we've got John Kelly's artist pack. We've got a letter from John Kelly to Ellen saying thank you for doing the show. We've got reviews, and all of that stuff lives in the physical space. And then on the other side, you can see what the digital show file looks like. So we've digitized that stuff. The only things that we don't digitize are personal correspondence, things with contact information, although if we can redact that and still share the information, we do. And we don't do reviews because those exist elsewhere in the world, and we don't want to double up our time digitizing things that are already out there. But we do note in the record that they exist and that we have them. When we were talking about what to talk about and what to present, I thought what would be really useful both for people who have run archives and for the artists who want to work with them, what are the things that you really need to think about? So understanding collecting scope and policies. So if you're going to donate your stuff to an archive, if you're putting together your own collection and you have an idea of putting that out into the world at a repository, you really need to understand what it is that they collect. Our scope is limited to shows that happened at La Mama, because even with 5,000 square feet of space, all of that stuff's got to get processed, it's got to get taken care of, and so that's the limit that we put on our collecting scope. So we've had people who've worked at La Mama who want to donate their entire collections. And I have to say, if you want to pull out the 7 shows that you did at La Mama and just give us that material, that would be amazing. But if you want to keep it as a whole thing, we can try and help you find a location where you can donate that, whether that's the university that you taught at, or a local library, or that kind of thing. Because, it's all about whether, as an artist, you have to consider, is it better for me to have parts of my legacy in different locations, or do I want it all together as a cohesive whole, but that means that it's only in one spot, so it might be harder for people to find out about me, but when they do, they'll get to see everything all at once. There are things that you have to sort of weigh out. Understanding copyright. Just because you were in a show that happened at La Mama doesn't mean that I can give you footage of that show if you didn't create it. If you're the creator and you own that copyright, then I would have a little form for you to sign saying that we released it to you, and whatever happens to it once it's in your hot little hands is up to you, and we're not liable for that. But if you do decide to donate your collection somewhere, are you donating the copyright of the work, or are you limiting that? So we've had playwrights who've said, La Mama can produce these plays as much as they want to, but if anybody else wants to produce it, then we want it to go through us, and we have to give permissions and license it. So that's something that you need to think about. And then lastly, understanding accessibility. Just because you give your archive somewhere doesn't mean it's going to be up like that immediately. So is that something that you want to do if you're making the archive yourself, or how is your material going to be shared and in what context? And then, so this is one other thing that I thought just for everybody, whether you're an archive or you're building your archive as an artist, create forms and processes. Think about this stuff before you do it so that you can document, you can keep track of not just what's in your archive, but how you're sharing it, how it's getting used. And then my final thoughts were creating an archive is not unlike creating a play or a performance work, because you need to think about who's the audience. You want to show, don't tell. So like when you're making decisions about what you're going to save in your archive, think about what that tells about your work. Is it about your process? Are you going to have a collecting scope? Are you going to share everything that you've ever written? Like, do you want your journals from when you were in 7th grade included, or is it just the stuff that relates to works that were produced somewhere? And then the last thing is that La Mama is a living archive. As artists, the work that you create can be a living archive. It's not a static event. it's ongoing, but it's also generative. Like, you can go back to those works, and I mean, I'm a writer, so I go back and look at stuff that I wrote 15 years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, that's awful, but that was a really good idea, and how can I create something new using that idea? But archiving itself is iterative. You don't have to create your archive all in one go. It's, you know, you start collecting things, and then you start thinking about how you want to share that work and all of that. So,
yeah, and I guess, you know, one of the things that we were talking about on the way here is sort of, and I guess that's one of the reasons why we as La Mama are, you know, why we're here, is this idea of how can we interface with and sort of be together with artists. As, I mean, as I said, I don't think of us as an institutional archive in the same way that these other archives exist, but how can we serve the artists, and vice versa, you know, how can we have this relationship of archiving together, as opposed to it feeling as though, you know, it's all up to the artists to do it on their own.
Yeah. And that's something that when I talked about those forms and processes, it's for us to, like, you can see, like, we have loan forms and collection forms and that sort of stuff, but we have release to artists. So we have that form so I can release things to them, but we also have deeds of gift, like things coming into the archive, and then really understanding the artists that are in our archive. We, just by necessity and the amount of materials that we have, might not have everything that should be in that space. So how can they fill, like, archival gaps that we have? And then also, like, Ping Chong and Company, now Ping Fang, had some videotapes that got put in a closet that were by a heater, and so their archival copy of a couple of shows had gotten damaged, so they reached out to us because we still had really good copies. So we were able to fill, and they have a really great, amazing archive that they've put together, but they still had gaps. So it's how you can work together to build legacy in a way that it's not one person just trying to get everything out there. It's how can you work with an institution or a community archive, because we consider ourselves a community archive. We document the work of a community of artists. The archive itself grew up organically, and the people who work in the archive, like my background, I didn't perform at La Mama, but I have plenty of friends who did. And plenty of people that I performed with that performed at La Mama. But our archives associate, Shigeko Suga, has been an artist at La Mama since the 80s. Obviously, I mean, it's a huge loss, but Ozzy Rodriguez started as a performer at La Mama in 1967 and built his life around protecting and sharing these legacies. And so it's a huge, enormous weight, but it's also what an amazing response. Like, I'm gonna cry now, and I'm not even but it's building this sense of legacy, especially in these times that are so difficult. Like, it's, I think, more important now than ever to document these stories, document the works of artists who often are marginalized, whose voices certain people don't want you to hear. These stories deserve to be recognized and preserved. And we have a role in that, but you as artists also have a role in that.
And I think the digitizing aspect of it is really interesting, you know, and you mentioned sort of part of the work that we've been doing in the recent past is, you know, I talk about that we have a poster child that I during the pandemic, who in the chat said, you know, I've always wanted to see a La Mama show and now I can. She was a young artist in Missouri. And I think about that a lot, like in terms of this grassroots global arts movement that was a much more localized arts movement that happened here in New York City. But what is that, to have an artist who can now have access to a John Kelly show, you know, and actually be able to do that so that maybe they can feel as though they can make work, their identity can be kind of, you know, somehow they can understand themselves more where they are so that they can actually make work where they are, as opposed to feel as though they have to come to New York City or get out to be an artist. And that's why I feel like this could, us digitizing the work that we've been doing could actually have a huge impact in ways that we can't even imagine at this point. Again, nothing to replace what happens in person in this space like we are now and feeling each other's physical energies. But yes, sorry, we're going over our time,
No,
aren't we?
this
No.
is, we're
Yeah.
going to do a
Yes,
switch now.
yes,
Yep.
great,
Okay.
thank you.
Our digital collections are catalog.lamama.org, and you can email me at archives@lamama.org.
Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so they'll be back for our Q&A section. So what we wanted to do today is to put, and it's come sit down. Is to put institutional archives in conversation with individual artists who are more at the beginning of creating the archive. And so today we're very lucky to have artist, the aforementioned artist John Kelly here, who's got decades of work on the field. And Tanisha Jones, who spent many years of her career at New York Public Library for the Performing Arts and the Dance Division, and she's now an independent curator and project manager who is working back at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. And so they're going to talk about the John Kelly Archive and where that is in its process. So we want to compare like something that's well established, so like the La Mama Archive, with something that's at its beginning, so we can see there's a whole spectrum of work in the Archives Community Project.
Well, hello everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening, and I just wanted to talk about my relationship to John right now, which is such a thrill for me. Yes.
Can Ed set up the sound?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it's right for
Yeah,
sound.
that's right. Ed, you want to sit here?
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Should I talk over again?
Yeah.
You talk over me. So, like I was saying, so I am serving as the advisory archivist for the LGBTQ Artists Archives Project. And through that, I'm having the absolute pleasure of working with John as he is imagining, and working on his personal archive right now. So, as Ken said, we are in the beginning stage, or John is in the beginning stages of, assessing his materials, examining it. So we're going to have a conversation about that tonight. Okay, great, thanks, Ed. John, did you want to start with?
Wait a minute. Open the upper left-hand part of the, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I didn't know, John, if you wanted to start with video.
Yeah, why don't we start with the video? Let me put it in context. It's just a 2-minute section from a piece I did at La Mama in kind of right before COVID called Time No Line, but it was based on 35, 40 years of journal writing beginning in 1977. So it was really like me as an artist going back into my past to revisit it, to embody it, to reflect on it. But literally in the clip that you'll see, there's a back wall and it's covered with copies of journal pages. So it's literally me going back into myself. So that's what the short video is.
I'm just noticing, John, a lot of these are JPEGs, and
Yeah,
I don't see
Time No Line is a
Let me
wait,
see.
no, those are images.
Those are images, yeah.
Is there like a movie file or a
Let's see.
MP4?
Yeah, I'm looking for the MP4.
No, these are all.
Yeah, let me see if maybe there's a way I can get.
Okay. And also just what? Well,
Please.
yeah.
Please.
I mean, how great to be part of the La Mama history. I saw my first production there when I was 14. It was a midnight performance of the original Trocadero Gloxinia Ballet Company, founded by Larry Ray, aka Ekaterina Sobechinskaya. And it was just life-changing. Then I saw the Cockettes down the street at the Anderson Theater. That was even more life-changing. So yeah, full circle.
Please. Can you come here for 1 second?
Sorry? And then I danced with the Trocadero Gloxinia Ballet Company. when I was trying to get my foot in La Mama's door.
Just noticing that JPEGs, there was no MP4, so I didn't know. What are you looking for? We're looking
The movie file.
The movie file.
Yeah, these are all images.
These are all images, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Excel.
Yeah.
It's the spreadsheet.
Well, I know how to do that. Don't mind me.
Thanks for your patience.
We didn't have time. We were messing with. We got a little. Oh no, I can't. Where am I? Where's the search thing?
And it's funny because I was performing in clubs, Pyramid Club, all that stuff, because I never thought I would go back into performing, and I did after having been a visual artist, ballet dancer, back to visual artist. But and moving out of the clubs, like La Mama was like this place. Just go up to Ellen in the street, and she gets a buzz from people. Like, are you kidding me? I'm not gonna do that. She's so beautiful and intimidating. But the way through was through the ballet.
Give me a minute.
Yeah. And I don't think Ellen even knew. I heard that she didn't even know that those midnight shows were happening. Is that true? Because she lived upstairs. It's like, what are these people? So, and I do remember her like showing me things under her bed, like these beautiful Victorian costumes and stuff.
Isn't it just John?
You know, John, while we're waiting for Alyce to find your video, I was just curious to ask, basically, where are you right now in the process of examining your materials, your archival holdings, and what are your thoughts about the process so far? I know it's early days.
I'm desperately looking for a box that has 3/4-inch videos in it, somewhere in my one-bedroom apartment or in the basement of Shea Bushwick. But aside from that, it's all in my apartment. But along the way in my career, it's been like, first of all, the final line item on a budget is video documentation, and I'm not going to eliminate that like people eliminate gym or art classes in school. So it was really imperative from early on to document the work, especially after I got my first review and kind of the endorsement of critics in public was like, and also in terms of applying for the next grant. But now I'm really just at the beginning of looking at what's there, kind of freaking out about the different formats that stuff is on, going high 8, I hear it has a high dropout rate. I mean, that's kind of freaking me out. Sometimes people put it in the microwave, I know. I won't do that, but the way I also look at it, you know, generationally, because I lost my first partner to AIDS in 1982, so really I represent a lost generation. So I'll pick up on that after we watch the clip.
Okay.
The glorious mess that resides in these writings, ghost images of impulses realized and abandoned in my own time.
images?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so the thing is, like this sequence, it was scrolling journal entries, dated scrolling journal entries, and this was the 8th sequence. I'm sorry to be a downer, but that was kind of the core, of this work ultimately. And I was drawing body shapes on the floor, and kind of just covering the stage like an accumulation of history of life, of consideration of effort, of memory, and of the detritus of one's life and one's creative work. But really, metaphorically, I often refer to it, and I've done this many times before, I'll do it again, having, my generation really just, it's like World War I, but I represent the lost generation, and as a long-term survivor of the pandemic, I feel a mission to, even more of a mission to, digitize my work and then make it available to all these young people who are coming to the city, trying to find some vestige of that last gasp of physical bohemia that was the East Village in the 70s and 80s. And also, I often look at it as if, we went from the silent films to the talkies, and a lot of the nitrate film disintegrated. And it's ironic, though, that when the protease inhibitors came along, which was a real reprieve for people's lives in the mid-1990s, it also coincided with technology coming on, and the plethora of cameras and the plethora of documentation, everything. Whereas earlier than that, there weren't that many cameras around. It was really hard to document the work, and you had to really go out of your way to find someone with a camera and do that. But the endorsement I got from critics, from public, from colleagues, and from institutions like La Mama really compelled me early on to try to document as much as I could, even way back at the Pyramid Club in 82, 83, and 84.
Right. And so with the project and trying to, do our best to support John in his efforts, we're providing, as many resources as we can to help him, sort of identify the intellectual information about his material. So I just wanted to show an example, and John has just started this process. I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is an Excel spreadsheet which has a number of various tabs in it that are, identifying particular elements within a person's archive. Moving image materials, audio materials, photographic materials, any paper-based materials that he could possibly have, programs and things like that. John has been focusing right now on his moving image portion of his collection and has been populating a number of the fields within this. And this actually is a template that we are providing, members of the project. And it was something, the genesis of this template was actually something that was created by my archives colleague in the field, Patsy Gay, who is the associate archivist at Jacob's Pillow, but is also serving as well along with me as a advisory archivist on the LGBTQ Artists Archives Project. And so when she was working as an archivist to David Gordon, she had created this spreadsheet, which is serving really well as a wonderful tool to sort of support, the artists within this. And so I don't know if you can see, but right now there's a plethora of moving image formats, as John has mentioned, that represent his archive, everything from celluloid film to magnetic media and optical media as well. And so right now you have 130 assets so far, and that's growing.
And that's short of that one box that I can't yet find.
That you can't yet find, exactly.
And that's strictly moving image.
And that's strictly moving image, yeah.
And it runs the gamut. Like early on, I started using projections in my work, Super 8 projections, and then 16mm. So there's that, as well as all these various antiquated, video formats. My God. Yeah.
And John, you were saying that your collection right now predominantly resides in your apartment. Are there other locations in which your materials are?
I wouldn't trust. I've moved around a fair amount in my life, and I once had a horrible storage space debacle. Luckily, I
facets and, having, these, materials that an artist, generates within their career, as I'm sure, John, you go back to that, they're reference materials for you in potentially creating new works or just referring back to, past works that you've done for other purposes or for fundraising, endeavors.
Well, there are some works I haven't looked at yet because I can't stand it. Alyce is what I will change. I mean, literally, it's a piece I worked with Alyce Dissette on at the kitchen. I had just broken my neck, and it was, oh my God. And anyway. It's tough. But, yeah, what did you ask?
Oh, John, maybe it was too long.
Oh, yeah.
I was just thinking, as you're reviewing your materials, what are you thinking about? I mean, you've touched on it a little bit, but how have you used your archive thus far? And as you are in the process of getting it, prepared for an eventual, well, that's even a question for you as well. Like, what do you envision, for the long term, sort of like sustainability of your materials? It being in a repository and an archive, do you have thoughts about that process for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have access to a lot of it because it hasn't been digitized. I actually bought a high-end camera during COVID thinking I would at least look at it. I was afraid it might break, so I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But also, there are generations that are writing exhuming, putting out into the world my generation's histories. Hopefully they will get it right. I've been on so many documentaries of different aspects of the times that I've resided in, and for the most part, young academics, whatever, they seem to be speaking to the right people. But while we're on the planet, get us in the can and get our history right. But my responsibility as an artist is to share this work eventually, even though I've pillaged the history of recorded music without permission in a lot of these works, he said. But I go on Instagram and there's this guy, John Clifford, who was a principal dancer and choreographer with New York City Ballet, and worked very closely with George Balanchine. And I think Balanchine had a camera in the house all the time. And I was once backstage. I was working with. I was at ABT school, and I was doing small roles with ABT, and I was backstage while we were rehearsing. The City Ballet was in performance, and I ran into George Balanchine in this hallway. He didn't know who I was, but I walked past this room where he had a monitor and a chair, so there was a live feed where he could watch the performance from back of house. So I think that's why so many of those videos exist, and seeing snippets of them on social media is incredible, even if they're not very good quality. Seeing Gelsey Kirkland in a really bad video is still staggeringly compelling. So given the rescuing of these formats and hopefully the eventual digitizing of them, even if they do reside in varying aspects of viewability, even there's I think 11 seconds of Isadora Duncan on video, and that's it. There is a tape of Ruth Draper performing one of her characters, but those things are so tantalizing, and as an artist, they're so worshipful because they can give one an actual glimpse of what a specific artist was doing at a given time, and in the lineage of creative effort, it's very reassuring, and it's nice to get permission from them to compel you to move forward with your impulses and to create. So,
yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we had the opportunity through Mia and Kylie's presentation to see John represented in La Mama's catalog and how they have described, the materials that are in their archive. And I thought it would be also interesting to see how you were reflected in the New York Public Library's catalog. So if you go onto nypl.org and hit the research tab of their website, you would enter their research catalog. And so
it has my real date. Okay.
It does have your real date. This is your Library of Congress name authority.
It's a
and so it's yes, and through looking that up, I was able to really refine the materials that.
Wikipedia at 5 years younger.
I think in our catalog you are.
That's interesting. So as you can see, there's a wealth of material. You're very well represented within the New York Public Library. But speaking to that, you're clearly represented at La Mama. You're at NYPL. You had just mentioned the kitchen. I would assume that you have holdings there potentially. I don't know. But
No, generally the presenters that presented work in New York, they didn't document your work. You had to document your work.
Yes, right.
You really had to go in every way, and so it's been up to us as artists. I think the stuff that's in the box I can't find. What it is mainly is 3/4-inch tapes. I gave them to the library, and they gave me 3/4-inch dudes.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's also a really kind of pathetically angry oral history that I did right after I did BAM. When I did BAM in '93.
I think this may be the catalog for it, I believe.
Live trapeze and tightwire. My company went bankrupt. It was just a disaster. Even though it was sold out, it was just like I was $85,000 in debt. It was crazy. So I was not in a very good mood when I did the oral history. It's theater access. But that was such a blessing to have you guys come and care for this work. So I moved around a lot after that.
After that, exactly.
It was always an issue, yeah.
Right.
So thank you.
Oh, please. Our pleasure. John, I didn't know if there was any other, things you wanted to address or.
I don't know. I'm just so grateful for you, Linda, Alyce, for doing this, because it would be entirely up to me to make this happen. And there's so many other things to do and get done, and the daunting prospect of where the hell do you get all these different formats digitized? And is it too late? Are they still valid? Can they be rescued? Is there a microwave?
Well,
who's going to use it?
Right. Well, one thing I will say about that, from the perspective of your understandable concern about, audio and moving image formats, and obviously issues with obsolescence, but also issues in terms of degradation. One of the most important things about this process is that we want to do it in, a best practices way. So, I know you're talking about like baking them and things like that. No, I know not you. I know not you, John. No, I'm just saying. But no, I just want to point out that, we know that we will be doing that methodically.
No, I know.
And I know you know that. I'm just saying. Just putting it out there.
And I have to say one thing though. Years ago, I read an article. I think it was the Village Voice, and it was about an article about Twyla Tharp's archive. I think a lot of it may have been on film. I don't know, but it was. She opened a box and it all turned to jelly or something. It was this horrifying article, and it was really a while ago. But that single article really compelled me to be vigilant about stuff generally. So really, this initiative is going to spread out, and maybe not so much now. It's not an issue because everything is digitized, But still, for artists who are, have work on various formats, the imperative to care for it as much as one can, and then as soon as one can, get it digitized. But that single article that I read really stayed with me, and in terms, because it's an ephemeral art form, and it disappears. Even I'm so far at the end of it now that I think I could finally look at those tapes and not be judgmental and freaked out by the performances, and maybe be proud of them, and maybe really feel compelled to share them and celebrate like decades of work, because you're always on to the next thing, and it's just you're always moving forward, and but the grace that can occur with looking back and really savoring what one has achieved over time with the help of one's community and one's collaborators. So I just feel enormous pride in this initiative, because again, if it were on my shoulders, it would still be on the back burner.
just want to, follow up with you with that to say that the blessing is that we do have a community that, will support you and that will enable, artists to find the resources that are required to do this effectively and responsibly and, and most importantly to, have your legacy presented in the way that you want it to be.
And also, that the idea of grouping with institutions sounds really great because they have staff to help usher things into care and maybe into the world, but that really is also a fantastic idea.
Oh, great. So we're going to push the monitors back. You guys can sit there. Push the chairs over. All right. And invite Kylie back. Alright, so we're just gonna, John will be center, and we're just gonna project into the mic so our friends at home can hear us. And we're gonna take some questions in a minute, but I wondered if you, listening to each other, had any questions about that. I'd like to dig a little bit into resources. Just like what John was telling, there's someone out there and connecting, and some of the hurdles. So we talked about the challenge of the age evaporating. But some of those, like the big challenges in doing the archival work, and then some of the resources available.
I was going to say, I think the biggest challenge is getting started. And just sort of, La Mama started as well with Excel spreadsheets.
Right.
Like it started with a playlist that was typewritten by Paul Foster, like literally typewritten, and then starting in the 80s, and it was like lists and folders, and then with more and more computers, it was Excel spreadsheets, and that was what led us to be able to digitize the materials. Because obviously we have a very fancy collection management system that we use that was tailor-made for us, but even without that, we still do a lot of stuff with Excel spreadsheets. Like when we're trying to gain control over a new collection or new materials or like our audio collection. And so don't be daunted. Like small steps is fine. A little is better than nothing. Don't let perfect be the enemy of better.
So starting with a list of some sort.
Yeah.
What do you have that you want to save, and then making a list of it?
Or
so
even
it's like the title, the format.
just a list of what shows was I in.
Okay.
Write it down, and then go, okay, now what do I have that relates to these things? What am I missing? Oh, I have this, which I totally forgot I was in. Add that to the list. Like, just starting very much with basics.
And then at what point in the list making do you decide like this was yes or no? Is this part of the list or is this not part of the list?
Well, that's the interesting conversation. If you happen to be in a situation such as I will be communicating with John about that, and just wondering what an individual artist is thinking about in terms of what they feel is important to retain and what they feel is something that they do not want represented. And I think for me personally, I guess not in that position, it's fascinating for me to find out. Sometimes I don't even learn as an archivist why the creator has made a decision in what they've decided not to retain. I don't know, John, if you even are thinking about that and can speak to that in any way. But not to put you on the spot, but
it's already the one performance really I already edited. Like, right. At what point were you in a position where you would like self-censor, like, no, I never did that. Destroy all that. And then it turns out later, actually, I'm quite proud of it.
Because I look so much younger. But also, I just think, I have have to believe that each piece, each work I was doing my best. Even though there may have been challenges that stay with me, but I mean, I think again, having such a distance on the work, it's kind of a celebration of, kid, you did your best, you know. So I can't imagine any of these works that I would not want to have digitized and not want to see. Yeah. And they also speak of a time and place, you know, very specifically. And kind of, right, from this vantage point, it seems like it gets so harder and harder to make work, to find the money, and we're competing with influencers and everything else. So the artist has got to be, you know, a genius at social media and a genius at overcoming ageism and things like that. So yeah, it's gotten tough. So again, the historical importance of previous work, I think, will speak for itself, short of any fears I may have of how good is it.
You were talking about when we started with the moving images on various formats that you have in your archive, and projections, I guess, too. What other things that maybe aren't easily digitized? Do you have like costumes? Like what other things are in your archive?
Don't get me started. Oh my God. Yeah, I've got costumes. I have painted set designs by Huck Snyder. I have costumes by Donna Zakowska, who did the costumes for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, who I collaborated with, starting with the Kin in 1992. Ephemera, a lot of set and prop items, and I know those are hard to maintain, and they probably need a lot of Febreze, and they're all in the basement of Shea Bushwick. But they are, you know, interesting items. I think Meredith Monk had an exhibition at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts of a lot of ephemera and costumes in it. But I understand that is a hard thing to, you know, maintain in place. So for me, the moving image stuff is at the very, very top of the possibilities of saving things. But yet again, I wouldn't want to just donate this stuff to Materials for the Arts. There is some historical gravitas and pedigree and DNA to these things. So yeah, that's a whole other challenge. Yeah. I mean, costumes are always going to be fun and alluring, but the set pieces, that might be harder.
Right. And if you can't save a physical costume or set piece or some other three-dimensional object, like what other ways can you, I mean, it could be documented obviously in a moving image or photos of the thing, but you know, in what other way could you preserve some facsimile of it, if not actually?
Yeah. Oh, gee, I don't know.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
They're hard to get elsewhere.
Yeah.
Someplace in Texas,
I
right?
mean, I think the
You think
rock
of the Harry
arts
Wilson
is
stuff.
one of the few places that has,
Yeah.
in particularly representing this period of time in art making, has saved that stuff. It's just, you know, where do you put it? I mean, the library's running out of room.
Yeah.
So,
There's something that occurs to me, for example, like if you get a space like this and bring in your set pieces and your costume pieces and display them, and then we can like shoot a video of you telling the story of each of the things. We can get close-ups, and then we have the video and your stories about the things. Like, is that something? Is that a way to save it?
We've
And then
done
it
that.
goes
Yeah.
With Ozzy.
Yeah.
We had to kind of like record him, I don't know, multiple times doing the archive tour. Where he's talking about each object and us going through it. And you're right. I mean, I don't know
That's a
how
creative
I should
way.
look at and see sort of how well we documented them, because it would be great to have the multiple angles and all of that.
Yeah, because if the object is not gone, then we have the video of
That's
at least some details on it.
And the video of the original production. I remember, excuse me, looking at in a museum at a book of fabric samples for the dresses of Marie Antoinette. And they were in a book form, so they retained all their color. They were incredible. So there were little swatches, so maybe even if you're going to get rid of stuff, maybe just get a swatch of it. But the DNA of those, the objectness of that stuff does have can have its own magic too. Although I hate the idea of cutting up a piece of a set, but stuff you're getting rid of it, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, here's the ideal, and here's the next best thing, here's the next best thing. The ideal is to come into this room and be here in person. live stream, after that, so we can report on it, right? And so that there's a spectrum of ways in which we can experience and preserve.
And we do have the technology now to shoot in 3D, so if you
Yeah.
wanted to do that, I know that there is.
No, we could, and then someone in the future could do like a laser 3D printing of it.
Right. We could really go with this.
Yeah, I was an altar boy, and one time there was a lost and found at St. Aloysius Church in Jersey City, and I would go through it, and it was like, oh my God, there was this like kind of relic-y thing, like a tiny piece of fabric, and this touched Veronica's veil. And it was kind of damaged, so I put my finger, it's like, oh my God, I actually touched Veronica's veil. But still, maybe not.
I did want to mention, as we talk so much about digitizing, that especially as artists or people who are working with these records, need to remember that digitizing doesn't necessarily solve a problem.
No.
You are actually just creating another thing that you need to preserve.
Yes.
And to think about like formats and things. So obviously it is almost impossible to open a Word document from 2003, but you can still open the Gutenberg Bible and see what's in there. So understanding that digitizing for access is absolutely the best way to go, but for like preservation, it's a different thing.
Yeah, it's
So,
true. Yeah.
but I think a lot of artists are like, oh, well, I took photos of it. I've got digital photos. I can get rid of the originals, and that's not the best way to go. It's definitely better to have the photos than have nothing, but play those considerations out in your mind when you're emptying out the closet or your storage space.
Kylie brings up an excellent point, because with that process in thinking of digital preservation, it's endless migration. You're migrating to the newest format, and it's just that it's just in perpetuity that would have to be done in order to sort of preserve and save the object, the asset.
Yes, I mean, we think oftentimes like archives are forever, but that they need to be attended to.
Exactly.
And preserved in its dynamic and its time. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to open it up to like this amazing audience who's here. I'll try to keep a queue as best I can, and I'll watch the time.
Just on that same point, it sounds like you're talking a lot about digitizing existing physical documents, but I would imagine a lot of artists working today are doing it digitally to begin with. Would you then perhaps print it out and have it as a physical thing, or would it be a digital thing that then is already digitally preserved?
It can be either. I mean, we tend to print out at least
Like
a
scripts
few,
or something.
Just kind of repeat the question.
Oh yeah, I guess my question is, if you're already working digitally, then there wouldn't be any physical objects necessarily that would need to then be re-digitized to go into the, although of course in the rehearsal process you'd still have stuff. So I was just curious about what the mama would do about doing that.
Well, that big Eddie H. grant was to address all of our born digital records, but you want to save them in like non-proprietary formats, so saving things as like PDFs instead of Word documents, or things that have some more permanence. But you need to think about like, does it make sense for me to print a copy of this? So that which is
and
what
that would go in the archive
you do develop a protocol, right? So like, here's what we do right now.
Yeah.
And then case by case basis, it can be adjusted.
Yeah.
Or it evolves into the
But,
next thing.
but again, archiving is best practices, it is iterative, and it is doing the best you can to protect those records within the funds and the resources that you have available. Like, it would be great if we had perfect levels of preservation with everything, but that's just not feasible certainly for, you know, a community-based performing arts archive that's housed in a nonprofit, much less if we were at the Library of Congress. It still are decisions that have to be made there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
So I'm wondering if for either of the archives, if there are any preferences or priorities with the materials that you're collecting. I'm a dramaturg and PhD researcher, and my bias there is that my focus is always on process. So my time in the archive is spent not looking at ephemera collected as it relates to productions, but trying to track the development of thoughts from artists over time with the production or over the time of their career. So I'm wondering, first and foremost, if there are these priorities of materials that you're collecting. But then on the other hand, I'm wondering if there are different considerations that go into preserving process versus more product production materials.
Yeah, it's funny. I have boxes of journals going back to 1977, and initially I kept separate workbooks, which were sketchbooks, but then eventually they just morphed, and the personal and the creative, they just wound up in the journals. And I guess I will let them go somewhere, and God help me, go to therapy, but I could live with that, because I won't be here to have to live with that. But the other thing, when I'm writing articles or essays or applying for grants, where literally you have to kind of, make a case for your work, I like to print out and then edit the printouts, but then I save those edits in the archive. So in a way, maybe I'm functioning like a writer in that manner, because I think the process can be interesting for what you're talking about. Yeah. So and beyond that, the rehearsal process. Usually, you're just so focused on making the work that you're not, unless you have somebody with a camera floating around. But really, it's more about the destination. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's something as a dramaturg I think about a lot, or literary manager at Disney for a long time, and there's so many iterations of things. So like the notes from that creative meeting, and they're like, what got to this script draft, and how did we get here? And like those stories I think can be interesting, but you can't save everything. Like I started, recording Zooms and other things. I'm like, the storage on this is like insane. And so just in my own process with stuff I'm creating, I started to be selective, because I know like some of this process is interesting. And the thing is, like as a creator of records, you don't know what the end user of records, what questions they'll have, what are their lines of inquiry, what will they find interesting. And another thing that you brought up is that there may be some parts of your records that are sensitive, right? Because it would affect some real person's life right now. And so the thing in archives is you can always restrict certain items for a certain date or for certain access, but they can be in the archive too. So it's not just like, I can't let anyone see this, and you're like, well, not right now, but maybe in 10 years it'll be okay. Because those things, who knows what someone will find interesting or key to like this one question I had. Here's this record that it provides an answer. It could be really moving to find those things and try to piece together what someone's story was. They're no longer here.
I also think, I feel as much as you're right, there's a lot of focus on the actual production. There are times when we have actually saved scripts where you have the stage manager's notes and all of this kind of stuff, but we're really trying to focus on taking a lot more footage of rehearsals as opposed to just the, and you're reminding me that I want to go back and tell our folks dealing with the documentation that we really should do that as well. But the beauty, for me, of a place like La Mama is that these are the first encounters that these works are having with audiences. So even that part of that production or that premiere or whatever is still very process oriented.
you know, from Fancy Free to On the Town and all of these sort of examples of those kinds of things that ideally are represented in the archives, you know, so yeah.
I think too about one of the first projects that American Theater Archive Project did was working with New York Theater Workshop. We went in there for like a day's worth of interviews with the whole company there, and I remember to Nicola at the time, longtime artistic director, and I was like, well, what do you want to preserve about New York Theater Workshop? And Jim said, like, immediately, relationships. I have decades of correspondence with artists. And it's not something you think about, because, you know, it makes people think about, like, oh, well, what were the shows we put on stage? But he was just thinking about all these relationships that I built over time.
It's all our emails now.
Yeah, it's emails, outside letters. And we do have correspondence, like how much collaboration do we do, you know, in letters, in voicemails, and this sort of correspondence, this documentation of relationships. And it is a lot of time. Like, even if you're like an individual performing artist, you still have collaborators to get your show up, right? Like, what are those relationships like, and what are the records of those relationships that people might have questions about? Yes.
Just in terms of the digital age, I want you all to think about the number of photographs you take, the number of videos you take that you leave on your phone or wherever that are image numbers. Do you know, I mean, how much easier it is for me to flip through this booklet for something that I thought was really interesting, but to go through, you know, however many thousands of stuff on my phone, and I'm at fault, but, you know, I mean, that's one of the problems. And the other one is a decision which is cost saving for lots of companies and artists, which is put your program up on a QR, and maybe nobody's ever going to print that out anywhere, and your website will be upgraded at some point, and it will disappear. So think about those things that unintentionally you may lose, that you're going to need as a dramaturg or a researcher, and someone else it's going to, you know, not be able to see your first work because you learned the hard way about digital quagmire. And, you know, I mean, there's way too much. We don't curate right away, and what that may mean is that I'm here today, not furloughed from the Library of Congress, but I'm on vacation. I'm actually taking annual leave to hear you all. But I'm back at work. But seriously, the stuff comes in, and oftentimes it may be your heir or, you know, a brother or sister that just downloads all your stuff, and it's not identified in its numbers, and it's not in good file folders, and the next thing you know, we have nobody who can identify any of the people in the pictures.
Yeah.
Or even the work, because most of your works are in casual clothes, so it looks like all of the shows, or whatever it is, you know. But and it's also, you know, currently, I don't know what we're doing at NYPL now when it comes to acquisitions, but we have to do the cost of stewardship, which means and I'm sure you're thinking about that too, because of real estate, because of staff, because of digital resources for migration, and we love everything that we bring in, but it won't be useful if we don't know what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, and that also means as artists, please watch out for the run over by bus problem. I work a lot with dancers. Here, I brought one tonight. But you know, as much as we love body-to-body transmission, we need to have videos. We need to have other kinds of materials. So I'm just sort of being. I wish we could start doing this in education. That instead of saying, you know, your choreography project, the curtain goes up and down, and we give you an A. I want to see your, because I also adjuncted for a while before I found the job of my dreams. But you know, why can't we be helping each other be intentional and actually make the notes that you made to talk to your lighting designer? You know, maybe you don't have the swatches, but what did you get some little curly cues from your designer that maybe you So just some cautionary words because it truly is a glut. And I'm thinking about a project that, this is Laura Pettiman, who was a Hawkins dancer for those who, and I invited some other people too. An archivist that was
But it's something brilliant that I think that I feel, because as an artist, I wonder, as an institution, it's so limited in terms of what we can apply for our archives. It's so limited. And so I can only imagine for an individual artist, it's even more limited.
That's right.
So it's like, this is such a brilliant idea of maybe you create some cohort of our, a group of people that maybe, yes, thank you. I mean, this is a model that I think can be used for other groups of artists that can come together and say, you know what, it's not just on me to try and make this happen, but how can we come together as a community, as we've been talking about, to make sure that this work continues.
But that's also where I think this is a cultural moment, because as you know what's happened at the NEA.
Yes.
Okay. Why not the artist-driven archiving is also talking to, as this is going to get reinstated in a period of time. This is the cultural moment to change what the decision is and say all applications need to come in with at least X% of your budget going to how are you saving it and continuing to share it. Not that if you didn't walk through for that little run, you're never going to see it. Right? This is we want the taxpayer dollars to give value, and that means it should be accessible to 50 states and all the territories. Right? Because I mean that's a big deal with us because we're the nation's library, but how many people walk through our doors? But do come down.
That's a great segue in why we're here tonight to sort of reboot our projects and extend it out further into the community. Is that in making all these connections, both like maybe we create a one-pager like best practices for archiving your work, whatever it is, and then bring them into performing arts departments so that there's something, you get some training when you're in your undergrad or graduate program of like how to document your work so it can get preserved, so you can have access to it, other people can have access to it, and passing it on. Because the more people who go to the archives and actually cry, right? Like it's that knowing what the value of the legacy is, to be like, or to see something that you created that somehow you happen to save from 25 years ago, and you have a different point of view on it now, and there's an emotional connection to it. Or John Kelly fan can finally see this thing and be like, I missed that thing, and now I can finally see it. Right? Like these things have meaning, and what we do in the arts has meaning in the present, but it can also be not just locally, but globally, and well into the future, if we learn how to preserve it. So we're going to end the live stream here. We have a little reception. But for folks at home, please find more information on LGBTQ plus Artists Archive Project and the American Theater Archive Project. You can search them on Google and you'll get to our websites. And this is the beginning of a series that we hope to continue with other artists and